My husband stole my baby's birth certificate after 24 hours of labor. He had no idea what I'd already prepared. After enduring 24 grueling hours of labor, my husband Derek grabbed the birth certificate from the nurse and announced, "Our daughter will be Elena Sofia Morales after my mother, not Jessica like we discussed. You don't get a say in this anymore." I was exhausted, my body still shaking from childbirth, but I looked at him calmly and said, "I understand." The nurse beside me, Maria, whispered quietly, "Should I tell him about the paperwork you filed last month?" My name is Jessica Martinez, 29 years old, and I work as a financial analyst at Boeing in Seattle. Until that moment in the delivery room at Swedish Medical Center, I thought I knew the man I'd married 3 years earlier. I was wrong about Derek Morales, but I wasn't wrong about preparing for this exact scenario. I met Derek at a company holiday party in December 2019. I'd been working at Boeing for 2 years, finally feeling established in my career as a financial analyst in the commercial aircraft division. The party was held at the Four Seasons downtown, and I almost didn't go. My colleague Sarah had been trying to convince me for weeks. "Jessica, you work too much," she'd said. "When's the last time you went on a date, or even talked to a man who wasn't discussing quarterly reports?" She had a point. I'd been so focused on climbing the corporate ladder that my social life had become non-existent. My last relationship had ended 8 months earlier when my ex-boyfriend complained that I cared more about spreadsheets than him. He wasn't entirely wrong. The party was elegant twinkling lights, live jazz band, open bar serving top-shelf liquor. I wore my best black dress and stood near the appetizer table, making small talk with colleagues I barely knew outside the office. That's when Derek approached. He was tall, probably 6'2", with dark hair and the kind of smile that made everyone in the room notice him. He wore an expensive navy suit that fit perfectly, and when he walked toward me, conversation seemed to pause around him. "You must be Jessica from Boeing," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Derek Morales from Microsoft. I've heard amazing things about your financial analysis work on the MAX program." That should have been my first red flag. How did a software engineer from Microsoft know about my specific projects? Boeing and Microsoft worked together on various initiatives, but my role was fairly specialized. Why would someone I'd never met know anything about my work? But I was flattered. In my male-dominated field, recognition was rare, especially from someone as charming as Derek. "I'm surprised you've heard of me," I said. "What exactly do you know about the MAX analysis?" Derek's smile widened. "Your efficiency recommendations saved Boeing millions in production costs. Word gets around in Seattle's tech community about brilliant women making waves in traditionally male industries." He spoke with confidence and specific knowledge that impressed me. We talked for an hour about industry trends, Seattle's tech scene, and our shared love of hiking in the Cascades. Derek was engaging, funny, and genuinely seemed interested in my opinions, rather than just trying to impress me. "Would you like to continue this conversation over dinner sometime?" he asked as the party wound down. "I know a place in Belltown with incredible seafood and a view of the Sound." I said yes immediately. It had been months since anyone had shown genuine interest in both my professional accomplishments and personal interests. Our first date was at Waterfront Seafood Grill 3 days later. Derek arrived 15 minutes early, had already secured the best table overlooking Elliott Bay, and stood when I approached old-fashioned manners that I found charming after years of dating men who could barely look up from their phones. "You look beautiful," he said, and I believed he meant it. Dinner conversation flowed effortlessly. Derek told me about his work developing cloud security protocols for Microsoft's enterprise clients. He asked thoughtful questions about my career goals, my family, my interests outside work. When I mentioned that I'd been taking Spanish lessons, he responded in fluent Spanish, explaining that his mother had insisted he maintain his heritage language. "Family is everything to her, Sorsti," he said with what I interpreted as affection. "She raised me to respect tradition and take care of the people you love." At the time, I found his devotion to family values attractive. My own parents had divorced when I was in college, and I craved the stability of someone who prioritized long-term commitments. Derek paid for dinner without hesitation, walked me to my car, and kissed me goodnight with just enough restraint to leave me wanting more. As I drove home to my apartment in Capitol Hill, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: genuine excitement about someone new. Over the next 2 months, Derek courted me with an intensity that felt like something from a romantic movie. Flowers delivered to my office with handwritten notes about how proud he was of my latest project successes. Weekend trips to Leavenworth for Christmas markets, to Mount Rainier for snowshoeing to Victoria, BC, for high tea at the Empress Hotel. He remembered details about my work stress and would show up with my favorite Thai takeout after particularly long days. When I mentioned loving the ballet, he surprised me with tickets to Pacific Northwest Ballet's Nutcracker Prime seats that cost more than I made in a week. "I want to experience the things you love," he said. "Your happiness makes me happy." Derek never pressured me physically, never made demands on my time, never criticized my career focus. Instead, he seemed to admire my ambition while providing emotional support that I hadn't realized I'd been missing. Valentine's Day arrived 6 weeks after our first date. Derek planned an elaborate evening dinner at Canlis, Seattle's most exclusive restaurant, followed by a horse-drawn carriage ride through downtown. During dessert, he pulled out a small velvet box. My heart stopped. It was too soon for a proposal, wasn't it? Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a small airplane charm. "For the woman who's helping Boeing soar," he said, "and for reminding me that love can happen when you least expect it." It was perfect, thoughtful, personal, and not too overwhelming. I wore that bracelet every day afterward. 2 months later, Derek suggested we move in together. "My lease is up in May," he said. "And honestly, I hate being away from you. We could find a place in Bellevue, something with a view close to both our offices." Moving in together after only 4 months felt fast, but Derek made compelling arguments. We were both successful professionals. We were spending most nights together anyway, and splitting expenses would allow us both to save more money for our futures. We found a 2-bedroom condo in downtown Bellevue with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Washington. Derek insisted on putting the lease in his name because his credit score was slightly higher, and he offered to handle the security deposit and first month's rent. "You can pay me back gradually," he said. "No pressure. I just want us to get the place we want." Living together was blissful for the first few months. Derek cooked elaborate dinners when I worked late, never complained about my weekend work sessions during busy reporting periods, and gradually introduced me to his hobbies: rock climbing at local gyms, wine tasting in Woodinville, weekend trips to the San Juan Islands. But I started noticing small changes in his behavior around the 6-month mark. Derek became increasingly interested in the details of my work schedule, my salary, my 401k contributions, my stock options. He'd ask casual questions about my benefits, package, my vacation time, my long-term career plans. "I just want to understand your world better," he'd explain when I questioned his sudden curiosity about my finances. "We're building a life together. I should know about these things." He also began making subtle suggestions about our future that felt more like decisions he'd already made. We'd buy a house when the market was right. I'd eventually transition to a more family-friendly role at Boeing. We'd move closer to his mother when we got married so she could help with grandchildren. I wasn't consulted about these plans. They were presented as natural progressions that Derek had concluded on our behalf. But the changes were gradual enough that I attributed them to normal relationship evolution. Couples discussed finances. Partners made long-term plans together. This was what commitment looked like, right? 8 months after our first date, Derek proposed during a weekend trip to the Oregon coast. We were walking on Cannon Beach at sunset, and he got down on one knee beside Haystack Rock with a 2-carat diamond ring that caught the last light of the day. "Jessica Martinez," he said, "you're the most brilliant, beautiful, and perfect woman I've ever met. Will you marry me and let me take care of you for the rest of our lives?" The proposal was romantic, the ring was stunning, and I was deeply in love. I said yes without hesitation, even though part of me wondered what he meant by "take care of you." Derek swept me into his arms, spinning me around as tourists applauded nearby. In that moment, with the Pacific Ocean crashing behind us and my future husband holding me like I was precious, I felt like the luckiest woman alive. I should have asked more questions about his definition of taking care of me. I should have wondered why he'd chosen a ring without asking about my preferences. I should have been curious about how he'd afforded such an expensive piece of jewelry on a software engineer's salary. Instead, I was planning our wedding and dreaming about our future, completely unaware that Derek had been planning something entirely different. Derek insisted I meet his mother, Elena Morales, before we announced our engagement publicly. Family approval is important to me, he explained. Mom needs to know you're serious about us. Elena lived in a sprawling house in Phoenix, Arizona, where she'd moved after Derek's father died when Derek was in high school. She flew to Seattle for our introduction dinner, arriving with enough luggage for a month-long stay, though she was only visiting for the weekend. The first time I saw Elena, she was stepping out of a Blacktown car at the Four Seasons Hotel, dressed like she was attending a state dinner. Designer dress statement jewelry, perfectly styled hair, despite having just traveled for 3 hours. She moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. Derek had reserved a private dining room at the Metropolitan Grill for our introduction dinner. I wore my best dress and spent an hour on my makeup, wanting to make a good first impression on my future mother-in-law. Elena's opening words to me were, "So you're the woman who thinks she can handle my son." Not "congratulations on your engagement." Not "I'm so happy to meet you." Just immediate territorial marking disguised as maternal concern. "Derek speaks about you constantly," I replied, trying to sound warm and respectful. "He clearly adores you." Elena smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Derek is my only child, my greatest achievement. I've sacrificed everything to give him the best life possible. I hope you understand what that means." Throughout dinner, Elena peppered me with questions that felt more like an interrogation than getting to know you conversation. What was my 5-year career plan? Did I plan to keep working after children? How much money did I make? What were my thoughts on traditional gender roles in marriage? Every answer I gave seemed to disappoint her slightly. When I mentioned loving my career at Boeing, she frowned. When I said Derek and I planned to share household responsibilities, she looked concerned. When I explained that we hadn't yet discussed having children, she exchanged a meaningful glance with Derek. "Modern women," Elena said with a sigh, "always think they can have everything, but successful marriages require sacrifice and prioritization. Derek needs a wife who understands that his happiness comes first." Derek nodded along like this was completely reasonable relationship advice. When I looked at him for support, he just smiled and said, "Mom has strong opinions, but she means well." After dinner, Derek walked Elena back to her hotel while I drove home alone, trying to process what had just happened. His mother had essentially told me that my role in the marriage was to prioritize Derek's needs above my own. And Derek had acted like this was normal family dynamics. When Derek returned to our condo 2 hours later, I tried to discuss my concerns about Elena's comments. "She's just protective," Derek said, dismissing my worries. "She raised me by herself after Dad died. She wants to make sure I'm with someone who will love me the way she does. But she talked about me sacrificing my career and putting your happiness first," I protested. "That doesn't sound like a partnership to me." Derek pulled me into his arms, using physical affection to deflect the conversation. "Jessica, you're overanalyzing. Mom was just testing you because she cares about me. Once she gets to know you better, she'll love you as much as I do." I wanted to believe him. The alternative, that I was marrying into a family where the mother expected complete subservience from her son's wife, was too disturbing to accept. Elena stayed for the rest of the weekend, and the pattern became clear. She had opinions about everything related to our engagement and future marriage. Our wedding venue shouldn't be too modern. My dress shouldn't be too revealing. Our honeymoon destination should be family-friendly in case we wanted to bring her along. Our future children should learn Spanish before English to honor their heritage. Derek never contradicted her suggestions. When I tried to express different preferences, Elena would turn to Derek with phrases like, "Explain to Jessica why family tradition matters," or "Help her understand why this is important." By Sunday evening, I was exhausted from navigating Elena's passive-aggressive commentary and Derek's refusal to establish boundaries with his mother. As we drove her to the airport, Elena delivered her final verdict on our relationship. "Derek, mijo, I can see why you're attracted to Jessica. She's accomplished and beautiful, but marriage isn't about attraction. It's about finding someone who will support your dreams and put family first. I hope Jessica understands that." She squeezed my hand as she said this, smiling sweetly, while delivering what felt like a warning disguised as advice. After Elena's plane departed, Derek and I went to dinner at our favorite Capitol Hill restaurant. I tried once more to discuss my concerns about his mother's attitude toward our relationship. Derek, I need you to understand something, I said carefully. I love you and I want to marry you, but I'm not going to become a different person to please your mother. I have my own career, my own goals, my own opinions about how our marriage should work. Derek reached across the table and took my hand. I love that you're independent and ambitious, he said. I wouldn't want to change that about you. Mom just needs time to adjust to the idea of me being married. Once you're family, everything will be different. I believed him because I wanted to believe him. The alternative was admitting that the man I loved came with a mother who viewed me as a threat to be neutralized, rather than a daughter-in-law to be welcomed. Over the next few months, as Derek and I planned our wedding, Elena's involvement intensified. She called Derek daily to discuss wedding details, often making suggestions that contradicted decisions Derek and I had already made together. When I pointed out these contradictions, Derek would say, "Let me talk to Mom and see if we can find a compromise." But the compromises always seemed to favor Elena's preferences over mine. Elena insisted on inviting twice as many guests as Derek and I had originally planned. The Morales family has many important friends who need to be included, she explained. Derek agreed without consulting me about the additional expense. She criticized my choice of wedding dress as too modern and took me shopping for something more appropriate for a Catholic ceremony. When I reminded Derek that I wasn't Catholic and we weren't planning a Catholic wedding, he said, "We can discuss the ceremony details later. Let's just keep Mom happy about the dress." Elena appointed herself as the wedding coordinator, despite my having already hired a professional planner. She scheduled meetings with vendors without informing me, made decisions about flowers and music based on her personal taste, and presented these choices to Derek and me as fait accompli. Mom just wants everything to be perfect, Derek would say, when I complained about being excluded from decisions about my own wedding. The breaking point came during our cake tasting appointment. Derek, Elena, and I went to Metropolitan Market's bakery to sample different flavors and designs. I had envisioned something simple, an elegant vanilla cake with raspberry filling and minimal decoration. Elena had other ideas. She wanted a 3-tier fondant creation with elaborate sugar flowers and traditional Mexican wedding cake flavors, like tres leches and dulce de leche. "This is what a proper Morales family wedding cake should look like," Elena announced, showing the baker photos she'd printed from Pinterest. "Jessica, you'll learn to appreciate authentic flavors once you're part of our family." I tried to suggest a compromise, perhaps incorporating some traditional elements, while keeping the overall design more contemporary. Elena dismissed my suggestions immediately. "Derek explained to your fiancé why family traditions matter more than modern trends," she said, turning away from me entirely. Derek looked uncomfortable, but ultimately sided with his mother. "The cake is just one detail, Jessica. If this makes Mom happy, why not go with her preferences?" Because it wasn't about the cake. It was about whether I would have any voice in my own marriage, or whether Elena would make all the important decisions while Derek nodded along. That night, I gave Derek an ultimatum. "I need you to choose," I said. "Either you start supporting my feelings and preferences, or you can plan your wedding with your mother without me." Derek looked genuinely shocked. "Jessica, you're being dramatic. We're talking about cake flavors, not major life decisions." "We're talking about respect," I corrected. "Your mother treats me like an inconvenience she has to tolerate, and you enable that behavior by always siding with her. This isn't about cake. It's about whether you see me as your partner or just someone your mother has to approve." Derek was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "You're right. I've been trying to keep everyone happy, but that's not fair to you. From now on, we make decisions together, and Mom will have to accept our choices." He seemed sincere, and I wanted to believe that we'd turned a corner in our relationship. For a few weeks, Derek did stand up to Elena when she tried to override our wedding decisions. He told her we'd chosen our cake design and weren't changing it. He informed her that we'd hired our own photographer and didn't need her friend's services. Elena wasn't pleased with Derek's newfound backbone, but she seemed to accept that she couldn't control every aspect of our wedding planning. I thought I'd won that battle. I had no idea that Elena was simply changing tactics, shifting from open control to more subtle manipulation that would take months to fully recognize. The wedding itself was beautiful, despite Elena's attempts to choreograph every moment. Derek and I exchanged vows overlooking Puget Sound at the Seattle Art Museum, surrounded by friends and family who genuinely celebrated our love. During the reception, Elna made a toast that seemed gracious on the surface but felt like a warning to anyone paying close attention. "To my son Derek and his new wife Jessica," she said, raising her champagne glass. "Marriage is about learning to put family first, making sacrifices for the people you love, and understanding that some bonds are unbreakable. I know Jessica will learn to appreciate what it means to be part of the Morales family." The room applauded, but I noticed the careful phrasing. Elena hadn't welcomed me to the family. She'd said I would learn to appreciate what being part of it meant, as if my membership came with conditions I hadn't yet understood. Derek squeezed my hand during the toast and whispered, "She's trying, Jessica. Give her time." But I was beginning to understand that Elena's idea of me learning to appreciate the Morales family meant accepting her authority over major decisions in my marriage. And Derek's idea of giving her time meant waiting for me to surrender, rather than expecting his mother to respect boundaries. The honeymoon in Maui was perfect. Just Derek and me, no family interference, no wedding stress. For 2 weeks we were the couple I'd fallen in love with. Derek was attentive romantic and seemed genuinely committed to building a partnership based on mutual respect and shared decisions. But when we returned to Seattle and resumed normal life, Elena's influence crept back into our relationship like water finding cracks in a foundation. She started calling Derek every evening while we were having dinner discussing her day, her health concerns, her opinions about everything from local politics to our home decorating choices. Derek would answer every call, even when we were in the middle of conversations about our own lives. "Mom gets lonely in Phoenix," Derek explained. "These calls are important to her." Elena also began planning visits to Seattle every few months, staying for weeks at a time in our guest bedroom. During these visits, she would reorganize our kitchen according to her preferences, redecorate our living room with items she'd bought without asking, and cook elaborate meals that required Derek and me to eat dinner at times that conflicted with our work schedules. When I suggested that Elena might be more comfortable staying in a hotel during her visits, Derek looked at me like I'd suggested something cruel and unreasonable. "She's family, Jessica. Family stays with family. I thought you understood that." But Elena didn't treat me like family. She treated me like a temporary resident in my own home who needed to be managed and gradually trained to accept her vision of how our marriage should work. The real power struggle began during our second year of marriage, when Derek and I started discussing the possibility of buying a house and starting a family. I thought these were conversations for Derek and me to have privately before involving extended family in our decisions. Elena had other ideas. When Derek and I started trying to conceive during our second year of marriage, I assumed pregnancy would be a private matter between us, at least initially. I was wrong. Derek told his mother about our plans before we'd even stopped using birth control. Elena called me the next day with advice about fertility nutrition and preparing my body for the sacred responsibility of carrying a Morales heir. "Mija," she said, using the Spanish endearment that always sounded condescending coming from her. "Pregnancy is about more than just your health. You're carrying the future of our family bloodline. That comes with responsibilities you may not understand yet." I tried to explain that Derek and I wanted to keep our family planning private until we had news to share, but Elena dismissed my preferences entirely. "Family doesn't keep secrets from family," she said firmly. "Besides, I have important advice about conceiving healthy children. My grandmother had special prayers and traditions that ensured strong babies. You should be grateful for this wisdom." Elena's wisdom included specific dietary requirements: no caffeine, no processed foods, no restaurant meals, exercise restrictions, no running, no weightlifting, no stress-inducing activities, and lifestyle changes. Earlier bedtimes, meditation, daily prayer that felt more like religious observance than medical advice. When I mentioned that I'd already discussed family planning with my doctor and received evidence-based recommendations, Elena scoffed. "American doctors don't understand traditional pregnancy practices," she said. "My family has been having healthy babies for generations using methods that modern medicine ignores." Derek supported his mother's interference by framing it as cultural education. "Mom wants to share her heritage with you," he said. "Learning about Mexican pregnancy traditions could be interesting. But Elena's traditions weren't suggestions. They were mandates that she expected me to follow, regardless of my own preferences or medical advice. 3 months into our attempts to conceive, Elena started asking invasive questions about our progress. She wanted to know about my menstrual cycle, our timing, whether I was taking her recommended supplements, and why we hadn't gotten pregnant yet. "Maybe you're too stressed from that demanding job," she suggested during one of her increasingly frequent phone calls. Career pressure can prevent conception. Some women need to prioritize family over professional ambitions. When I finally got pregnant in February, Derek and I agreed to wait until the second trimester before telling family members. We wanted time to process the news privately and ensure everything was progressing normally before dealing with external opinions and expectations. Derek lasted exactly 3 days before calling his mother. I found out when Elena showed up at our front door unannounced, carrying shopping bags full of baby items and a folder thick with pregnancy advice she'd printed from various websites. Miho told me the wonderful news she announced, pushing past me into our living room. I flew up immediately to start helping with preparations. I looked at Derek, who had the grace to appear sheepish about violating our agreement to keep the pregnancy private. "I just wanted to share the good news with Mom," he said. "She's so excited to be a grandmother." Elena had already claimed our guest bedroom and began unpacking like she planned to stay indefinitely. When I asked about the length of her visit, she waved dismissively. "The first trimester is the most important time for proper care," she said. "I need to make sure you're doing everything correctly for the baby's health." Elena's version of proper care involved complete control over my pregnancy experience. She threw away all the prenatal vitamins my doctor had prescribed and replaced them with supplements she'd ordered from a company in Mexico. She stocked our kitchen with foods from her approved pregnancy diet and disposed of anything she deemed harmful to the baby. "Artificial preservatives and processed foods cross the placenta," she explained as she threw away my favorite yogurt brand. "The baby needs pure, natural nutrition." When I tried to assert my preferences about my own pregnancy care, Elena would turn to Derek for support. "Explain to Jessica why the baby's health comes first," she'd say, as if I were being selfish by wanting input about my own body. Derek consistently sided with his mother's recommendations over my preferences. When I pointed out that my obstetrician had approved my original prenatal vitamin regimen, Derek said, "Mom raised a healthy child. Maybe we should trust her experience." Elena also appointed herself as my pregnancy supervisor, monitoring my activities, my diet, my sleep schedule, and my stress levels according to her standards, rather than medical advice. She criticized my choice to continue working full-time during pregnancy, claiming that career stress could harm the baby's development. She disapproved of my exercise routine, insisting that any physical activity beyond gentle walking was dangerous. She monitored my water intake, my caffeine consumption, and even my television viewing habits. "Violent or stressful entertainment affects the baby's nervous system," Elena announced, confiscating my collection of crime drama DVDs. "Pregnant women should only watch peaceful, uplifting content." During my first prenatal appointment after Elena's arrival, she insisted on accompanying Derek and me to meet with my obstetrician. I tried to explain that medical appointments were private, but Derek supported his mother's involvement. "She wants to understand what's best for the baby," Derek said. "Having family support during pregnancy is important." Elena sat in the corner of the examination room, taking notes while Dr. Martinez discussed my health, my weight gain, my exercise needs, and my nutritional requirements. After the appointment, Elena argued with several of the doctor's recommendations. "American doctors don't understand proper pregnancy care," she told Derek in the parking lot. "In Mexico, pregnant women are treated with more respect for traditional wisdom." Elena's interference escalated throughout my first trimester. She scheduled her own appointments with alternative health practitioners who could provide holistic pregnancy support that my regular doctor apparently couldn't offer. She researched birthing centers and midwives without consulting me about my preferences for delivery. Most concerning, Elena began making long-term plans for the baby's care that assumed her continued involvement as the primary grandparent and decision-maker. She researched daycares near her house in Phoenix, claiming the baby would benefit from spending summers with her. She made appointments with pediatricians in Arizona who could provide backup care when Derek, the baby, and I visited. She even contacted private schools in Phoenix to understand their admission requirements for out-of-state students. I want to be prepared for when the baby needs proper guidance, Elena explained when I discovered her research. Growing up in Seattle is fine, but children need strong cultural roots and family connections. When I asked Derek about his mother's apparent assumption that our child would spend significant time in Arizona, he seemed surprised by my concern. "Mom's just excited about being a grandmother," he said. "She wants to be involved in the baby's life. That's a good thing, right?" But Elena's involvement didn't feel like grandmotherly excitement. It felt like territorial expansion, as if she were claiming ownership of my child before the baby was even born. The breaking point came during my second trimester, when Elena announced she'd hired a photographer to document my pregnancy for the family archives. She'd scheduled a maternity photo session without consulting me, chosen an outfit she thought was appropriate, and planned to include herself in several photos for the baby's future scrapbook. "This is my first grandchild," Elena said, when I protested the unsolicited photo session. "These pictures will be important family history," I finally exploded. "This is my first child," I said. "I should have some say in how my pregnancy is documented." Elena looked genuinely surprised by my anger. "Of course you'll be in the pictures, mija. But this baby belongs to the whole family, not just you." That phrase, "this baby belongs to the whole family," clarified everything for me. Elena didn't see my pregnancy as my personal experience, or my child as primarily my responsibility. She saw my pregnancy as a family project that she had the right to manage according to her preferences. Derek's response to my concerns was predictably unhelpful. "Jessica, you're being hormonal," he said. "Mom's just excited. Why can't you appreciate that she wants to be involved?" Because involvement and control were different things. Elena didn't want to be an involved grandmother. She wanted to be the decision maker about my pregnancy, my child's upbringing, and my role as a mother. During my 6th month of pregnancy, I overheard a conversation between Derek and Elena that confirmed my worst fears about their plans for my child's future. I'd come home early from work with a headache and found Derek and Elena sitting in our kitchen speaking in rapid Spanish. They didn't notice me standing in the doorway, and the conversation continued for several minutes before I understood enough to realize they were discussing legal preparations related to the baby. I heard phrases like ensuring control, medical authority, and custody arrangements that made my blood run cold. When Elena mentioned something about removing obstacles, I realized they weren't just planning to be involved grandparents. They were planning to take control of my child. When I confronted Derek about the conversation, he claimed they'd been discussing baby shower plans, and I'd misunderstood their Spanish. "You're being paranoid, Jessica," he said. Pregnancy hormones can make women suspicious of innocent conversations. But Derek's explanation didn't match what I'd heard. They'd been discussing legal preparations and control issues, not party planning. And Elena's comment about removing obstacles suggested they viewed me as something to be managed rather than the baby's mother. That night, I made a decision that would ultimately save my daughter's life and my own future. I realized that Derek and Elena weren't planning to support me as a new mother. They were planning to replace me as the primary decision-maker for my own child. If I wanted to protect my daughter and maintain my parental rights, I needed to prepare for a battle they didn't know was coming. While Derek attended his weekly dinners with Elena, and they continued making plans for my daughter's future without consulting me, I was quietly building a defense system they never saw coming. My first call was to my college roommate Sophia Chen, who'd become a family law attorney specializing in custody cases and domestic relations. Sophia and I had stayed close since graduation, and she was one of the few people who'd witnessed Elena's controlling behavior firsthand during my wedding planning. We met at a coffee shop in Capitol Hill on a Saturday morning when Derek thought I was attending a prenatal yoga class. I explained everything. Elena's constant interference in my pregnancy, Derek's refusal to establish boundaries with his mother, and the overheard conversation about legal preparations and removing obstacles. "Jessica," Sophia said after listening to my concerns, "what you're describing sounds like systematic preparation for parental alienation. Elena is establishing herself as the primary caregiver and decision-maker while undermining your authority as the mother." Sophia explained how controlling family members often spend months creating evidence that the biological parent is unfit, unstable, or undeserving of primary custody. The goal isn't necessarily immediate separation, it's ensuring complete control over major decisions about the child's welfare. They'll claim they're acting in the baby's best interests, Sophia said. Elena will position herself as the stable, experienced caregiver, while suggesting that you're too young, too career-focused, too stressed, or too influenced by modern parenting theories to make good decisions. Sophia's explanation matched everything I'd observed about Elena's behavior. The constant criticism of my pregnancy, the insistence on overriding my doctor's recommendations, the assumption that her preferences trumped my decisions. It all seemed designed to establish Elena as the authority figure, and me as someone who needed guidance and supervision. What can I do to protect myself? I asked. Document everything, Sophia advised. Save text messages, record conversations where legally permissible, keep copies of all medical records, and start building evidence that you're a competent, responsible parent who's being systematically undermined by family members. Sophia also recommended that we file preliminary legal paperwork, establishing my sole parental rights before the baby was born. If Derek and Elena are planning legal action, she said, we need to get ahead of them with documentation that proves you're the primary parent making informed decisions about your child's welfare. Over the next 2 weeks, Sophia and I developed a comprehensive legal strategy. We filed documents with King County Family Court establishing my maternal rights and medical decision-making authority. We created healthcare directives, ensuring that only I could make decisions about my pregnancy and delivery. We documented Elena's pattern of interference and Derek's pattern of prioritizing his mother's preferences over his wife's autonomy. But I knew legal paperwork wouldn't be enough if Derek and Elena were planning something more serious. I needed to understand the full scope of their intentions. That's when I made a decision that felt dramatic, but ultimately proved necessary. I hired a private investigator to monitor Derek's activities and communications. David Park was a former Seattle police detective who specialized in domestic surveillance and family law cases. During our initial consultation at his office in Ballard, David explained that family manipulation cases often involved more extensive planning than victims initially realized. Controlling family members rarely act alone, David said. If Elena is planning to challenge your parental rights, she's probably consulting with attorneys, gathering evidence, and building a case that you're not aware of. I hired David to conduct discreet surveillance of Derek's meetings with Elena and any attorneys they might be consulting. I also asked him to investigate Elena's background to understand whether she'd engaged in similar behavior with other family members. David's first report arrived a week later and contained information that made me physically ill. Derek hadn't been attending family dinners with Elena during her extended stays in Seattle. Instead, he'd been meeting with Elena and attorney James Morrison, a lawyer who specialized in emergency custody cases and grandparents' rights litigation. David had photographed Derek and Elena entering Morrison's office on 3 separate occasions. He'd also discovered that Elena had been researching Washington state custody laws, specifically focusing on provisions that allowed grandparents to gain legal custody when parents were deemed unfit or unable to provide adequate care. But the most disturbing discovery was that Derek and Elena had been consulting with medical professionals about claiming I was suffering from postpartum depression or pregnancy-related mental health issues that made me an unfit mother. David had obtained copies of Elena's browser history from her hotel's business center, which showed extensive research into postpartum depression symptoms, involuntary psychiatric holds, and legal procedures for removing children from homes where mothers were experiencing mental health crises. Elena had been building a case to claim I was mentally unstable and unfit to care for my child, despite having no evidence of mental health issues beyond normal pregnancy stress and frustration with her interference. But David's investigation revealed something even more devastating. Derek was having an affair. David had followed Derek during a supposed business trip to Portland the previous month. Derek hadn't been attending a Microsoft conference as he'd told me. Instead, he'd spent the weekend with Carmen Rodriguez, Elena's business partner's daughter, at the Hotel Monaco. David's surveillance photos showed Derek and Carmen holding hands during romantic dinners, shopping together for jewelry, and checking into the hotel as a couple. The timestamps on the photos coincided exactly with Derek's claimed business travel dates. David had also managed to record several conversations between Derek and Carmen using long-range audio equipment when they met at outdoor restaurants. The content of these conversations made me feel physically sick. Once Jessica's out of the picture, we can finally start our real family, Derek had told Carmen during dinner at a waterfront restaurant in Portland. My mother's attorney says the custody case will be straightforward if we can document her mental instability during and after delivery. Carmen's response was equally chilling. I can't wait to raise your daughter properly. Jessica's too career-focused and selfish to be a good mother anyway. She doesn't understand family values like we do. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning to raise my child together while I was legally eliminated from the picture through claims of mental unfitness. David's final piece of evidence was the most damaging. He'd discovered that Elena had been secretly recording conversations with me during her visits to our home using a small digital recorder she kept in her purse. These recordings were being edited to capture moments when I expressed frustration, exhaustion, or disagreement with her pregnancy advice. Elena was creating an audio library of me sounding stressed, argumentative, or unstable that could be used as evidence in a custody proceeding. Every time I'd argued with her interference or contradicted her advice, she'd been documenting my responses to build a case against my parental fitness. I sat in David's office reading his report and felt my entire world collapse. The man I'd married and trusted with my life was planning to steal my child with the help of his mother and his mistress. They'd been preparing for months to claim I was mentally unfit, while Derek would appear as the stable, concerned father protecting his daughter from an unstable mother. Jessica, David said gently, I need to ask, do you have any history of mental health treatment? Any documented incidents of emotional instability? Anything Elena could use to support her claims? I shook my head. I'd never been treated for depression, anxiety, or any mental health condition. I had no history of emotional outbursts, substance abuse, or behavioral problems. My worst crime was being frustrated with Elena's interference and Derek's refusal to support me. Then their case depends on manufacturing evidence of your unfitness during pregnancy and delivery, David said. They're planning to claim that pregnancy hormones, career stress, or family conflict has made you temporarily unable to care for your child. David explained that Elena's strategy was probably to provoke emotional responses from me that could be recorded and presented as evidence of instability. Derek would testify about my mood swings, my resistance to family involvement, my career obsession that prevented proper maternal bonding. They'll request temporary custody while you receive mental health treatment, David said. By the time you're legally cleared to parent, Elena will have established herself as the primary caregiver and will argue that removing the child from her care would be traumatic. I realized that Elena hadn't been trying to help with my pregnancy. She'd been setting up to steal my child by making me appear unfit in comparison to her experienced, stable grandmotherly care. What can I do to protect myself? I asked David. Stop reacting emotionally to Elena's provocations, he advised. Document everything she does, but don't give her ammunition by arguing or appearing distressed. And prepare for whatever they're planning during delivery. David's investigation had revealed that Elena and Derek were planning something during my hospital stay that would trigger their custody case. Based on the legal research Elena had conducted, they were likely planning to claim I was experiencing a postpartum mental health crisis that made me temporarily unable to care for my newborn. I went home that evening and looked at Derek across our dinner table, trying to comprehend that the man buttering bread and asking about my day had been planning to destroy my life for months. That night, while Derek slept peacefully beside me, I stared at the ceiling and planned my counterattack. 3 weeks before my due date, I received a call that confirmed my worst fears about Derek and Elena's plans. The call came from Jennifer Walsh, a representative from my health insurance company, Ms. Martinez. Jennifer said, "We've received some unusual requests regarding your maternity coverage that require verification. Someone has been attempting to modify your policy to designate your husband as the primary decision maker for any medical emergencies during childbirth." My heart started racing. What kind of modifications? Jennifer explained that Derek had submitted forms requesting that he be granted power of attorney for all medical decisions if I became incapacitated or emotionally unable to make decisions during labor and delivery. The forms included my forged signature, authorizing Derek to make decisions about my medical care, the baby's care, and post-delivery arrangements. "The signature on these forms looks questionable," Jennifer continued. were required to verify any changes to maternal decision-making authority directly with the policyholder. When Jennifer emailed me copies of the fraudulent forms, I immediately recognized Derek's attempt to forge my signature. As a financial analyst who reviewed hundreds of signed documents each month, I was familiar with signature analysis. Derek had practiced copying my signature, but he'd missed subtle details like the specific way I dotted my I's and crossed my T's. The forged authorization was comprehensive and terrifying. It would have given Derek complete control over my medical care if I were unconscious, sedated, or deemed emotionally distressed during childbirth. Derek could authorize medications, surgical procedures, discharge arrangements, and even custody transfers without my consent. I called Sophia immediately and forwarded the fraudulent documents to her office. "This is attempted medical fraud," Sophia said grimly. "But more importantly, it reveals their strategy. They're planning to claim you're mentally incompetent during delivery, so Derek can make decisions about both your care and the baby's custody." Sophia explained that Elena and Derek's plan was probably to provoke an emotional crisis during labor that would justify removing me from medical decision-making. If I appeared distressed, argumentative, or irrational during delivery, Derek could claim I was experiencing a postpartum mental health emergency that required professional intervention. Once Derek has medical authority, Sophia said, he can authorize transferring the baby to Elena's care while you're held for psychiatric evaluation. By the time you're cleared, Elena will have established herself as the primary caregiver. The realization that they were planning to use my own childbirth experience against me felt like a betrayal beyond anything I'd imagined. Derek was supposed to be my support person during the most vulnerable moment of my life. Instead, he was planning to exploit my vulnerability to steal our child. But Sophia had more devastating news. Her investigation into Elena's background had revealed that this wasn't the first time Elena had manipulated family custody situations. Elena Morales has been involved in 3 previous custody disputes. Sophia said, showing me court documents she'd obtained through legal research. In each case, she gained custody of grandchildren by claiming the mothers were unfit due to mental health issues. The pattern was consistent. Elena would identify a daughter-in-law or family member she wanted to control, then systematically undermine that person's credibility while positioning herself as the stable, alternative caregiver. She'd used claims of postpartum depression, substance abuse, and domestic violence to remove children from their mother's care. The mothers in these previous cases fought back, Sophia said, but Elena had months to prepare her cases while they were dealing with newborns and post-delivery recovery. None of them anticipated the attacks until it was too late. Elena's most recent custody victory had occurred just 3 years earlier when she'd gained custody of her nephew's twin daughters by claiming their mother was suffering from postpartum psychosis. The mother had spent 2 years and $40,000 in legal fees trying to regain custody of her children. Elena is a predator, Sophia said bluntly. She targets women who marry into her family, then systematically destroys them to gain control of their children. You're not her first victim, but we're going to make sure you're her last successful one. Sophia and I spent the rest of that week developing a comprehensive protection strategy. We filed emergency motions with King County Family Court to prevent any unauthorized changes to my medical authority. We notified my insurance company about the attempted fraud and requested additional security measures for my account. Most importantly, we prepared documentation that would prove my mental competency and parental fitness if Elena and Derek attempted to challenge my custody rights. But I knew legal paperwork wouldn't be enough if they managed to create a crisis during delivery that made me appear unstable. I needed witnesses who could testify about my actual mental state, and people who would advocate for my rights if Derek tried to claim authority over my medical care. I also realized that I needed to understand the full scope of Derek and Elena's conspiracy. David Park's surveillance had revealed the affair and the legal planning, but I suspected there were other elements to their scheme that we hadn't discovered yet. David's continued investigation revealed the final pieces of Elena and Derek's plan, and they were worse than anything I'd imagined. Elena had been researching private adoption agencies and pediatric care facilities in Phoenix, Arizona. She'd contacted lawyers about emergency custody transfers and had even hired a nanny who could care for my daughter immediately after Elena gained custody. Elena hadn't just been planning to claim I was unfit. She'd been planning to remove my daughter from Washington state entirely. Once Elena gained temporary custody, she intended to take my child to Arizona while I fought the legal proceedings from Seattle. She's done this before, David explained. Elena gains custody through emergency proceedings, then relocates the children to Arizona, where custody battles become more complicated for the biological parents. David had also discovered financial elements to Elena and Derek's conspiracy. Elena had been systematically draining Derek's savings and retirement accounts to pay for legal fees, private investigators, to research my background, and bribes to healthcare workers who might support their claims about my mental state. Derek had been stealing from our joint accounts to fund Elena's custody preparations. Over 6 months, approximately $40,000 had been transferred from our savings to accounts controlled by Elena. But the most personally devastating discovery was that Derek had been using our stolen money to fund his relationship with Carmen Rodriguez. Hotel stays, expensive dinners, jewelry purchases, even the down payment on an apartment where Derek and Carmen planned to live after Elena gained custody of my daughter. David showed me credit card statements and bank records that documented Derek's double life. While I'd been trusting him to manage our finances and prepare for our daughter's birth, he'd been stealing our money to prepare for a future that didn't include me. They've thought of everything, David said grimly. Elena has legal representation and medical allies, financial resources, and a carefully planned strategy. Derek has his affair partner ready to serve as a stepmother, and they've already chosen pediatricians and schools in Arizona. I stared at the evidence spread across David's desk, photos of Derek with Carmen, court documents from Elena's previous custody victories, financial records showing the theft of our savings, forged medical forms that would have given Derek control over my delivery. For months, while I'd been excited about becoming a mother and building a family with Derek, they'd been planning to steal my child and erase me from my daughter's life entirely. But as I absorbed the full scope of their betrayal, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt and shock crystallized into something harder and more focused. Elena and Derek had underestimated me in one crucial way. They'd assumed I would be a passive victim who wouldn't discover their plans until it was too late to fight back. They were wrong. I had, weeks before my delivery date, legal representation, documented evidence of their conspiracy, and most importantly, I had advance warning about their strategy. Elena might have destroyed other women, but she'd never faced a financial analyst who understood how to build a comprehensive case using documented evidence and strategic planning. David, I said, looking up from the evidence, I need you to help me do something that will expose their entire operation. What do you have in mind? I smiled for the first time in weeks. I'm going to let them think their plan is working while I document everything they do. By the time they spring their trap, I'll have enough evidence to destroy all of them. With 4 weeks until my delivery date, I implemented a comprehensive strategy designed to protect my daughter while simultaneously gathering evidence that would destroy Elena and Derek's conspiracy. My first priority was ensuring that my actual delivery would be protected from their manipulation attempts. I quietly transferred my medical care from my original hospital to Swedish Medical Center, a different health system, where Derek and Elena had no connections or influence. I arranged for Dr. Amanda Chen, the head of the obstetrics department, to personally oversee my delivery. Dr. Chen was a veteran physician who dealt with custody manipulation cases and understood the medical and legal implications of family interference during childbirth. Ms. Martinez, Dr. Chen said during our private consultation, I've seen cases like this before where family members try to exploit medical emergencies to gain custody of newborns. We have protocols to ensure that only you make decisions about your care and your daughter's care. Dr. Chen arranged for hospital security to have photographs of Derek and Elena, with explicit instructions that they had no medical authority and could be excluded from my delivery room if necessary. She also scheduled a labor and delivery nurse named Maria Rodriguez to be my primary advocate during delivery. Maria had worked with family law attorneys on previous custody protection cases. But my most important preparation was legal and strategic. Sophia had arranged for Judge Patricia Wilson of King County Family Court to review our pre-birth custody protection documentation. Judge Wilson granted an emergency protective order that explicitly established my sole decision-making authority over my daughter's medical care, legal status, and living arrangements. The protective order also included language that would make it extremely difficult for Derek or Elena to claim emergency custody based on alleged mental health concerns. Any such claims would require independent psychiatric evaluation by court-appointed professionals rather than testimony from family members. This order means that Derek can't simply claim you're unfit and gain custody, Sophia explained. Any challenge to your parental rights has to go through proper legal channels with evidence that meets professional standards. But I knew the legal protections were only part of what I needed. Elena and Derek's plan depended on creating a crisis during delivery that would justify their custody claims. I needed to ensure that any crisis they attempted to manufacture would be documented as manipulation, rather than evidence of my unfitness. That's where my strategy became more aggressive. I decided to let Derek and Elena think their plan was proceeding normally, while I secretly documented everything they did. Instead of confronting them about their conspiracy, I would let them reveal their intentions through their own actions. I started by appearing to accept Elena's increased involvement in my pregnancy care. When she criticized my birth plan preferences, I thanked her for her advice and asked her to explain her recommendations in detail. When she suggested changes to my medical care, I asked her to put her concerns in writing so I could discuss them with my doctor. Elena interpreted my compliance as victory and became increasingly explicit about her plans for managing my delivery and taking control of my daughter's care. I've researched the best pediatricians in Seattle, Elena announced during one of our conversations. Dr. Morrison has experience with high-risk newborns and complicated family situations. I think we should transfer the baby to his care immediately after delivery. I thanked Elena for her research and asked her to email me Dr. Morrison's credentials and practice information. Elena's recommendation was suspicious because she'd never mentioned concerns about my baby being high risk. And I later discovered that Dr. Morrison specialized in providing medical testimony for custody cases, rather than routine pediatric care. Elena also began discussing post-delivery arrangements that assumed she would be the primary caregiver for my daughter. I've arranged to stay in Seattle for at least 6 weeks after the birth, Elena said. New mothers need experienced guidance, and I want to make sure you're not overwhelmed by responsibilities you're not prepared for. When I asked Elena what specific responsibilities she was concerned about, she provided a detailed list that essentially described her taking over all major decisions about my daughter's feeding, sleeping, medical care, and daily routine. Breastfeeding can be difficult for career women, Elena explained. Formula feeding is more practical for mothers who plan to return to work quickly. I can handle night feedings so you can maintain your sleep schedule. Elena's suggestions were designed to separate me from my daughter immediately after birth, while positioning herself as the knowledgeable caregiver who understood my baby's needs better than I did. I documented all of these conversations either through audio recordings where legally permissible, or through detailed written summaries immediately after our discussions. Elena's explicit statements about managing my delivery and controlling my daughter's care would be powerful evidence if she later claimed she was only trying to be helpful. Derek's behavior became equally revealing as the delivery date approached. He started asking detailed questions about my birth plan that seemed designed to identify opportunities for claiming I was being unreasonable or making poor decisions. "Are you sure you want to try natural childbirth?" Derek asked. "Maybe you should consider an epidural or C-section so you're not struggling with pain management during delivery." When I explained that I'd discussed pain management options with my doctor and felt comfortable with my current plan, Derek persisted. "I just worry that if you're in too much pain, you might not be able to make good decisions about what's best for the baby." Derek was laying groundwork to claim that my pain level during delivery made me temporarily incompetent to make medical decisions. If I appeared distressed during labor, Derek could argue that I needed him to take over decision-making to protect our daughter's welfare. I began recording Derek's conversations about delivery planning, and his comments revealed a clear strategy to undermine my decision-making authority. "Maybe Mom should be in the delivery room with us," Derek suggested. "She has experience with childbirth complications, and she could help if the medical staff needs additional advocates for the baby." Derek was positioning Elena as a necessary medical advocate, rather than an interfering family member. If Elena were present during delivery, she could claim that my behavior or decisions were concerning and support Derek's request to take over medical authority. Most disturbingly, Derek began making comments that suggested he was prepared to claim I was experiencing mental health issues during pregnancy. "You seem really stressed lately," Derek would say after normal conversations about delivery planning. "Maybe you should talk to someone about managing anxiety during pregnancy." When I assured Derek that I felt emotionally prepared for delivery, he would persist. "I just want to make sure you have support if the hormones and stress become overwhelming. Sometimes women don't realize when they need help." Derek was creating a narrative that I was struggling with pregnancy-related mental health issues that might require professional intervention. His comments were designed to appear caring while actually building a case that I was unstable and needed his guidance. But Derek's most revealing behavior involved his secret communications with Elena and his attorney. David Park's continued surveillance showed that Derek was meeting with James Morrison almost weekly to discuss strategy and timing for their custody challenge. David had managed to record several of these conversations using long-range audio equipment when they met in public locations. The content of these recordings would later become the most damaging evidence against their conspiracy. "The key is timing," Attorney Morrison explained during one recorded conversation. "We need to wait until Jessica is in active labor when she's most likely to appear distressed or make statements that can be interpreted as irrational." Derek asked about the specific triggers that would justify claiming emergency custody. Morrison's response was chilling. "Any sign of resistance to medical recommendations, any emotional outbursts, any statements that suggest she's prioritizing her own comfort over the baby's welfare," Morrison said. "Elena will testify that she's concerned about Jessica's mental state. You'll request temporary decision-making authority, and will file for emergency custody before Jessica recovers enough to mount a defense. They were planning to exploit the most vulnerable moment of my life, active labor, to steal my child based on completely manufactured evidence of unfitness." But David's surveillance revealed the final element of their conspiracy that confirmed they had no intention of sharing custody or co-parenting with me. Derek had been apartment hunting with Carmen Rodriguez in Phoenix, Arizona. They'd put down a deposit on a 2-bedroom unit near Elena's house and had already enrolled in parenting classes together. Derek was planning to relocate to Arizona with my daughter and his mistress immediately after gaining custody. "Once we have legal custody," Derek told Carmen during a dinner conversation David recorded, "we can move to Phoenix and start our real family. Jessica will be stuck fighting the legal case from Seattle while we're establishing ourselves as the stable family unit." Carmen's response revealed that she'd been planning to serve as my daughter's mother from the moment Elena gained custody. "I've already researched preschools and pediatricians in Phoenix," Carmen said. "By the time Jessica gets visitation rights, if she ever does, our daughter will see me as her real mother." They weren't planning a custody battle, they were planning a complete erasure of my parental role. Derek would gain temporary custody through manufactured evidence, relocate to Arizona with Elena and Carmen, and fight any future legal challenges from a position of established caregiver status. I sat in David's office listening to recordings of my husband planning to steal my child and replace me with his mistress, and I felt something cold and focused settle over me. Elena might have successfully destroyed other women using these tactics, but she'd never targeted someone who discovered her plans in advance. Derek might be prepared to exploit my vulnerability during childbirth, but he had no idea that I'd prepared counter strategies for every element of his attack. By the time they implemented their conspiracy, I would have enough documented evidence to not only protect my daughter, but to ensure that Elena, Derek, and their legal co-conspirators face serious criminal charges for their attempted kidnapping. "David," I said, "I need you to prepare for the final phase of our documentation. When they make their move during delivery, I want every moment recorded." 3 weeks before my due date, I had all the pieces in place for what would become the most satisfying legal takedown of my career. When contractions started at 2 a.m. on a Thursday morning in early May, I didn't call Derek immediately. Instead, I followed the plan Sophia, Dr. Chen, and I had developed. First, I called Sophia and left a voicemail activating our legal response protocol. Then I called Dr. Chen's emergency service and informed them that I was in early labor and would be coming to Swedish Medical Center rather than my originally planned hospital. Finally, I called my sister Anna in Portland and asked her to drive to Seattle immediately. Only then did I wake Derek. "It's time," I told him, simply gently shaking his shoulder. Derek jumped into action with efficiency that confirmed he'd been preparing for this moment. Within minutes, he was fully dressed, had grabbed a pre-packed hospital bag I'd never seen before, and was making phone calls while I gathered my own belongings. "Mom, it's happening," Derek said into his phone while I was in the bathroom. "Yes, everything's going according to plan. The paperwork is ready and Morrison is on standby." I used my phone to record Derek's conversation, capturing his reference to paperwork and their attorney being on standby for what should have been a joyful family moment. During the drive to Swedish Medical Center, Derek made 3 more phone calls to Elena, each conversation more specific about their plans than he realized. "She seems calm now," Derek reported, but Morrison said first-time mothers often become irrational when the pain intensifies. "We'll know better once we see how she handles active labor." Derek was providing Elena with real-time updates about my emotional state, preparing her to claim concern about my mental stability based on normal labor experiences. At Swedish Medical Center, Derek immediately encountered the first obstacle to his plan. When he approached the admissions desk and demanded to speak with my attending physician, the staff politely but firmly explained that Ms. Martinez had specific instructions about her medical care and designated advocates. "I'm her husband," Derek protested when told he couldn't access my medical information without my explicit consent. "That doesn't automatically grant you medical decision-making authority, Maria Rodriguez." My nurse explained cheerfully, "Ms. Martinez has designated specific individuals as her medical advocates during delivery." Derek's perfect composure began to crack as he realized his forged power of attorney documents were useless at a hospital where they weren't on file. Maria escorted me to a private delivery room where Dr. Chen was waiting with a warm smile and a detailed plan for protecting my rights during delivery. "Jessica," Dr. Chen said, once we were alone, "everything is in place. Security has photos of your husband and his mother with instructions that they have no medical authority. Your designated advocates are on their way, and we're prepared to document any attempts to interfere with your delivery care." Labor progressed slowly but normally throughout the morning. Derek remained in the room, growing increasingly agitated as he realized he couldn't control the medical staff or access my treatment information. He made multiple phone calls to Elena, each conversation revealing more of their strategy. "The nurses won't let me make any decisions," Derek whispered during one call around noon. "Jessica must have done something legal to block me. Morrison needs to accelerate the timeline." I continued recording Derek's phone conversations, using a small device Sophia had provided, gathering evidence of his conspiracy, while appearing to focus on managing labor pains. Elena arrived at the hospital around 2 p.m., carrying flowers and a bag full of items she claimed were necessities for proper newborn care. She immediately tried to take control of my delivery experience, criticizing the hospital staff and demanding changes to my birth plan. "This room is too small," Elena announced after surveying my private delivery suite. "The baby needs more space, and I need room to assist with proper care." When Maria explained that the room was specifically designed for comfortable delivery and that Elena wasn't authorized to make changes to my care plan, Elena became visibly frustrated. "I'm the grandmother," Elena said imperiously. "I have rights regarding this baby's welfare." Maria's response was perfect. Hospital policy requires written authorization from the mother for any family involvement in medical decisions. Ms. Martinez has designated specific advocates, and you're not among them. Elena's frustration escalated throughout the afternoon as she encountered resistance from every staff member she tried to influence. Hospital security had clearly briefed the entire delivery team about the custody protection measures, and no one was willing to accommodate Elena's demands. By evening, when my labor intensified into active delivery phase, Derek and Elena were clearly prepared to implement their crisis strategy. Derek started making comments designed to suggest I was becoming irrational or unable to make good decisions. "Jessica seems really overwhelmed," Derek told Dr. Chen during a routine check. "She's not responding normally to the medical staff's questions." Dr. Chen's response was beautifully professional. "Ms. Martinez is responding appropriately for someone in active labor. Her vital signs are excellent, and she's demonstrating clear decision-making capacity." Elena tried a different approach, claiming medical expertise that would justify her involvement in delivery decisions. "In Mexican tradition, experienced women guide new mothers through childbirth," Elena told Maria. "Jessica needs my guidance to ensure proper delivery practices." Maria's answer shut down Elena's cultural manipulation immediately. Ms. Martinez has chosen evidence-based medical care consistent with American obstetric standards. Cultural practices can be incorporated only with the mother's specific consent. As my daughter's birth approached, Derek made one final attempt to gain medical authority by claiming I was experiencing a mental health crisis. "I'm concerned about Jessica's emotional state," Derek told Dr. Chen. "She seems disconnected from reality, and I'm worried about her ability to make decisions about the baby's care." That's when Dr. Chen delivered the line I'd been waiting for. "Mr. Morales, are you familiar with Washington State's informed consent laws? Because Ms. Martinez has demonstrated complete competency throughout her labor, and any claims to the contrary would need to be supported by professional psychiatric evaluation rather than family opinion." Derek's face went pale as he realized his strategy wasn't working. Dr. Chen wasn't going to support claims about my mental state. The hospital staff wouldn't grant him medical authority, and Elena couldn't influence my delivery care. When my daughter Sophia was finally born at 11:47 p.m., healthy, beautiful, and perfect, Derek immediately reached for paperwork he'd brought in his bag, rather than celebrating our daughter's arrival. That's when I knew the final confrontation was about to begin. "Our daughter will be Elena Sofia Morales after my mother," Derek declared, grabbing birth certificate forms from his bag, rather than the official documents Maria had prepared. "Not Jessica, like we discussed. You don't get a say in this anymore." Derek's words hung in the air like poison. After 24 hours of labor, after bringing his daughter into the world, Derek's first priority was attempting to erase me from my own child's identity, while establishing his mother's dominance over our family. I was exhausted, my body still trembling from delivery. But I looked at Derek with perfect calm and said, "I understand." Those two words clearly weren't the response Derek expected. He paused, pen hovering over the fraudulent paperwork, confusion flickering across his face. He'd been prepared for tears, arguments, or emotional breakdown that would support his claims about my mental instability. Maria leaned close to me and whispered, "Should I tell him about the legal documents you filed last month?" Derek's head snapped up. "What legal documents?" That's when the delivery room door opened and Sophia walked in, followed by Dr. Chen, hospital security, and my sister Anna, who'd driven through the night from Portland. "Hello, Derek," Sophia said pleasantly, setting her briefcase on the bedside table while security officers positioned themselves near the door. "We need to discuss some serious legal irregularities in your understanding of parental rights." Derek's face went completely pale. "Who are you? You can't be here. This is a private family moment." "I'm Ms. Martinez's attorney," Sophia replied calmly, pulling out a thick folder labeled with Derek's name. "And I'm here because you've just attempted to commit several felonies in front of multiple witnesses." Dr. Chen stepped forward with quiet authority. "Mr. Morales, the birth certificate forms you're holding are fraudulent documents. Ms. Martinez filed pre-designation paperwork with King County establishing sole naming rights for her daughter. Your signature alone has no legal authority, and your attempt to override her parental rights constitutes criminal interference." Derek looked down at his fraudulent forms, then back at me, holding our daughter. For the first time since I'd known him, Derek appeared genuinely confused about what was happening. "Jessica, what did you do?" Derek asked, his voice cracking slightly. I was holding Sophia now, feeling stronger and more focused with each passing moment. "I protected us," I said simply. Sophia opened her briefcase and began pulling out documents, photographs, and audio equipment. "Derek, would you like to explain why you forged your wife's signature on medical power of attorney forms? Or why you've been meeting with attorney James Morrison about claiming Jessica is mentally unstable? Or perhaps you'd like to discuss your financial theft and affair with Carmen Rodriguez?" Derek's composure completely shattered. His perfect mask of concerned husband and devoted father cracked apart as he realized the scope of what Sophia knew about his conspiracy. "I don't know what you're talking about," Derek said weakly, but his voice lacked any conviction. "Really?" Sophia smiled coldly, while pulling out surveillance photographs. "Because this is you meeting with Attorney Morrison 3 weeks ago, discussing strategies for emergency custody transfer. And this is you with Carmen Rodriguez at the Hotel Monaco, planning your future together, while stealing money from your wife's accounts to pay for your romantic getaways." Derek started backing toward the door, but hospital security moved to block his exit. "This is ridiculous," Derek said, his voice rising with panic. "Jessica just gave birth. She's obviously not thinking clearly due to hormones and stress. That's when Maria delivered the devastating blow that would later prove crucial in criminal proceedings. "Mr. Morales," Maria said in her professional nurse's voice, "are you familiar with Washington State's single-party consent recording laws? Because everything you've said in this room since your wife entered labor has been legally recorded with her knowledge and consent." Derek's mouth fell open as he realized that his phone conversations with Elena, his comments about my mental state, his attempts to gain medical authority, and his explicit statements about naming our daughter after his mother had all been captured on audio. Derek's phone began buzzing frantically. Elena was calling, probably wondering why their plan wasn't proceeding as scheduled. Sophia looked at Derek with the expression of a predator who'd finally cornered her prey. "Why don't you answer that call? I'd love to speak with your mother about her role in this conspiracy." Derek's hands were visibly shaking as he declined Elena's call, but Sophia had other plans. "Actually, Derek," Sophia said with deadly calm, "let's call your mother back. I think she'd want to know how her custody plan is progressing. Speakerphone, please." Before Derek could protest, Maria took my phone and dialed Elena's number, putting the call on speaker for everyone in the room to hear. "Derek, finally!" Elena's voice filled the delivery room. "Is it done? Do you have the custody papers signed? Did that wife of yours cause any problems with the delivery?" The silence in the room was deafening. Elena had just confirmed in front of multiple witnesses that she'd been planning custody manipulation rather than simply visiting her new granddaughter. Sophia leaned toward the phone with a professional smile. "Mrs. Morales, this is attorney Sophia Chen. I'm representing Ms. Martinez in a custody protection case. I believe you and I need to have a very serious conversation." Elena's voice immediately turned icy and defensive. "Who is this, Derek? What's happening? Why are there other people involved in our family business?" "Mom," Derek said weakly, "there's been a complication with our plans." "What kind of complication?" Elena's voice was sharp with panic. "You said everything was arranged. You said the medical staff would support our concerns about Jessica's mental state." Sophia smiled grimly as Elena continued incriminating herself. "Mrs. Morales, are you aware that conspiracy to commit parental kidnapping is a federal crime? Because I have recorded conversations between you and your son discussing exactly that conspiracy." Elena's tone shifted to full attack mode. "This is harassment and illegal interference in our family relationships. Jessica is clearly having some kind of postpartum mental breakdown, and Derek has every right to protect his daughter. Get those custody papers signed immediately, Derek." Dr. S.L. Chen stepped closer to the phone with the authority of a medical professional who dealt with family manipulation many times before. "Mrs. Morales, this is Dr. Amanda Chen, Chief of Obstetrics at Swedish Medical Center. I've personally monitored Ms. Martinez throughout her labor and delivery. She has demonstrated complete mental competency and excellent retry TM continue edit decision-making capacity. Any claims to the contrary are medically unfounded and potentially fraudulent." "I don't care what some liberal doctor says." Elena snapped her mask of respectability, finally dropping completely. "Derek has rights as the father, and that baby belongs to the Morales family, not some career-obsessed woman who doesn't understand proper motherhood." Sophia pulled out a digital recorder and pressed play. Elena's own voice filled the room from a conversation David had recorded weeks earlier. "Derek, you need to understand that Jessica is just an obstacle to our family's future. Once we have the baby under our control, Jessica becomes irrelevant. The Morales bloodline must be preserved from outside contamination." Elena went completely silent on the phone as her own words played back to the room full of witnesses. Sophia continued, "I also have bank records showing that you've been using stolen marital funds to finance your son's extramarital affair attorney fees for fraudulent custody planning and bribes to healthcare workers. Federal authorities consider this money laundering in support of a criminal conspiracy." That's when Derek's phone lit up with another incoming call. The caller ID clearly read Carmen Rodriguez. Maria answered Derek's phone before he could stop her. "Hello, Carmen. This is Swedish Medical Center. Derek is currently busy with some legal complications regarding the birth of his daughter." His daughter, Carmen's voice was confused and excited. "I thought Jessica was having delivery complications that might prevent her from being able to care for the baby. Derek said I should be prepared to step in as the primary caregiver once the custody transfer was completed." The room went completely silent. Even Elena stopped talking on the speakerphone. Carmen continued oblivious to the devastation she was causing. Derek promised me we could start our real family as soon as Jessica was declared unfit. When can I come to the hospital to meet my new stepdaughter? I've already bought clothes and formula since Derek said Jessica probably wouldn't be able to breastfeed due to her mental state. Sophia looked at Derek with undisguised disgust. You told your mistress that my client might have delivery complications and mental fitness issues. You were planning her replacement before your daughter was even born. Derek couldn't speak. His carefully constructed conspiracy was collapsing in real time as Carmen unknowingly revealed the extent of their planning. Elena's voice came through the speakerphone, shrill with panic. Derek, hang up right now. Don't say another word to anyone. Call Morrison immediately. But it was too late. The damage was complete, and everyone in the room had witnessed Derek and Elena's conspiracy being exposed through their own words and actions. Carmen was still talking on Derek's phone. I'm so excited to be a mother to Derek's daughter. Elena said I'd be much better for the baby than Jessica, since I understand family values and traditional gender roles. When should I come to Phoenix to help set up the nursery in Elena's house? Anna, my sister, looked at Derek with the kind of fury that comes from watching someone try to destroy your family. You were planning to take Jessica's baby to Arizona. You had your girlfriend ready to replace my sister as a mother. Derek finally found his voice, but only to make things worse. Jessica doesn't understand what's best for the baby, he said desperately. She's too focused on her career, too influenced by feminist ideas about motherhood. Elena and Carmen know how to raise children properly. Dr. Chen stepped forward with medical authority. Mr. Morales, you've just admitted to a criminal conspiracy to remove a newborn from her mother based on ideological disagreements, rather than any legitimate welfare concerns. Sophia began packing documents back into her briefcase. Derek, you and your mother have approximately 30 seconds to leave this hospital voluntarily before security escorts you out, and I file criminal charges for attempted kidnapping, medical fraud, and financial theft. Elena's voice came through the speaker one final time. This isn't over. We have rights as family members, and we'll fight this through proper legal channels. Sophia smiled coldly. Mrs. Morales, you've just confessed to multiple felonies in front of medical professionals, hospital security, and recording equipment. I look forward to seeing you in federal court. Derek looked around the room at the faces staring back at him. Medical staff who'd witnessed his attempted fraud, security officers who'd heard his conspiracy, family members who'd watched him try to steal his own daughter, and legal professionals who'd documented his crimes. Jessica, Derek said weakly. This isn't what I wanted. Things just got out of control. I looked at Derek while holding our daughter, feeling nothing but pity for the weak man who'd tried to steal my child to please his controlling mother and impress his mistress. No, Derek, I said calmly. This is exactly what you wanted. You just didn't expect to face consequences. Hospital security escorted Derek from the delivery room, while Elena's voice continued screaming threats and justifications through the speakerphone until Sophia finally ended the call. After Derek was removed from the hospital, Dr. Chen asked everyone except Sophia Maria and Anna to leave, so I could rest and bond with Sophia. But Sophia had more revelations that couldn't wait. Jessica, Sophia said seriously, David's investigation revealed financial crimes that go beyond what we discussed during Derek's conspiracy. You need to know the full extent of what they've stolen from you. Sophia pulled out financial documents that made my stomach drop. Derek has been systematically transferring money from your joint accounts to a family trust controlled by Elena for over 8 months. The total amount stolen is approximately $240,000. I felt like the room was spinning. $240,000. How is that possible? Anna grabbed my hand. Jessica, that's your entire savings account plus your Boeing stock options. Sophia nodded grimly. Your salary from Boeing automatically deposits into your joint checking account, and Derek has been transferring almost everything to Elena's trust within days of each deposit. You've been living on credit cards while your actual income was being stolen. Maria shook her head in disgust. They were stealing from you while you were carrying their baby and planning to steal your child too. Sophia continued with more devastating financial evidence. The trust account shows regular large withdrawals that we've traced to specific purposes. Elena spent over $65,000 on attorney fees for custody planning. $35,000 on private investigators to research your background and document your behavior, and $18,000 on bribes to healthcare workers who were supposed to support claims about your mental instability. I was holding Sophia, trying to process that Derek and Elena had spent nearly $120,000 of my stolen money preparing to steal my daughter. But the most personally hurtful discovery, Sophia said gently, is that Derek has been using your stolen money to fund his affair with Carmen Rodriguez. Hotel stays, expensive dinners, jewelry purchases, even the security deposit on their planned apartment in Phoenix, all paid for with money stolen from your accounts. Anna was furious. He was literally using Jessica's money to pay for dates with his mistress, while planning to steal her baby. Sophia pulled out credit card statements and bank transfers that documented Derek's financial betrayal in painful detail. Over 6 months, Derek spent approximately $45,000 of your stolen money on his relationship with Carmen, including the engagement ring he bought her last month. The revelation that Derek had been planning to marry Carmen using my stolen money while I was pregnant with his child felt like a physical blow. There's more, Sophia said. Elena has been using trust funds to pay for a furnished apartment in Phoenix where she planned to take Sophia immediately after gaining custody. She's also prepaid for 6 months of private childcare services and even enrolled Sophia in a waiting list for an exclusive preschool. Elena hadn't just been planning to steal my daughter temporarily. She'd been creating a complete life for Sophia in Arizona that didn't include me at all. What happens now? I asked Sophia. Derek and Elena have committed multiple federal crimes, Sophia replied. Wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, and attempting to file false documents with the court. The evidence is overwhelming. Dr. Chen leaned forward. What would you like us to do about ongoing security? Jessica, Derek, and Elena might attempt to return to the hospital or contact other family members. I felt a cold clarity settle over me as I looked down at Sophia sleeping peacefully in my arms. My daughter was safe. Derek's conspiracy had been exposed, and I had documented evidence of every crime they'd committed. I want Derek arrested, I said firmly. I want Elena arrested. I want every penny of my stolen money returned. And I want both of them permanently banned from any contact with Sophia. Sophia smiled with professional satisfaction. I'll contact federal prosecutors first thing tomorrow morning. With the evidence we have, Derek and Elena will be facing serious prison time. Anna squeezed my hand. What do you need from me, Jessica? Stay with us, I said. I want Sophia to be surrounded by people who actually love her, not people who see her as property to be stolen. Maria, who had been quietly observing our family conference, spoke up. Ms. Martinez, I've seen family manipulation cases throughout my nursing career, but I've never seen anyone as prepared to fight back as you were. Most women don't discover these conspiracies until it's too late. I'm a financial analyst, I said. I notice patterns, I document everything, and I plan for contingencies. Derek and Elena made the mistake of underestimating what I was capable of when my child was threatened. Dr. Chen stood up to leave. I'll make sure hospital security maintains extra protection for your room tonight. Tomorrow, when you're ready to be discharged, we'll coordinate with your attorney to ensure a safe transport home. After everyone left except Anna, I sat in the quiet hospital room holding Sophia and thinking about everything that had happened. Derek's betrayal, Elena's manipulation, the months of preparation that had led to this moment. It all felt surreal now that the immediate crisis was over. Are you okay? Anna asked softly. I looked down at my daughter's perfect face and felt something I hadn't experienced in months: complete peace. I'm better than okay, I said. Sophia is safe, I have evidence to destroy everyone who tried to hurt us, and I never have to see Derek or Elena again. Anna smiled. So what happens next? Next we go home and start our real life, I said. Just Sophia and me with people who actually care about us. The birth certificate Derek had tried to steal was just paper. But the love, protection, and fierce determination I'd prepared in advance, that was everything. That's what had saved Sophia, saved me, and would now destroy the people who'd tried to steal our future. 6 months after Sophia's birth, I was sitting in my new apartment overlooking Lake Washington, watching my daughter play with toys scattered across our living room floor. The late afternoon sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting warm light across the space I decorated entirely according to my own preferences. Sophia had handled the legal aftermath with surgical precision. Derek was arrested at his workplace 3 days after Sophia's birth, escorted out of Microsoft's campus in handcuffs, while his colleagues watched in shock. Elena was arrested at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, trying to board a flight to Mexico with $80,000 in cash from her liquidated assets. The federal charges were extensive conspiracy to commit kidnapping, wire fraud, money laundering, identity theft, and attempted corruption of medical records. Derek's forged power of attorney documents and Elena's bribery attempts with hospital staff elevated their crimes to federal jurisdiction. But the most satisfying development came when Carmen Rodriguez was arrested at the Phoenix apartment she and Derek had rented, using my stolen money. Carmen had been planning to serve as Sophia's temporary guardian, while Elena fought custody proceedings, making her a co-conspirator in the kidnapping plot. During Carmen's arrest, police discovered a nursery she'd prepared for Sophia, complete with clothes, toys, and furniture purchased with money Derek had stolen from our joint accounts. Carmen had been so confident in their plan that she'd already created social media accounts announcing herself as Sophia's new mother. Derek's criminal trial began 4 months after his arrest. I testified about discovering his affair, his financial theft, and his conspiracy to steal Sophia through fraudulent custody claims. The audio recordings of Derek's hospital conversations and his planning sessions with Elena provided devastating evidence of their premeditation. Derek's defense attorney tried to claim that Derek had been manipulated by his controlling mother and had never intended to actually harm Sophia or me. But the evidence of his affair, his financial planning with Carmen, and his active participation in Elena's conspiracy destroyed any sympathy the jury might have felt. Derek was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison. Elena received 8 years for organizing the conspiracy and her history of similar manipulations with other family members. Carmen was sentenced to 3 years for her role as an accessory. The civil restitution was equally satisfying. Derek and Elena were required to return all stolen funds, plus penalties and interest totaling over $350,000. Elena's house in Phoenix was sold to pay part of the restitution, and Derek's Microsoft stock options were liquidated to cover the remainder. But the most personally meaningful justice came when Derek's former colleagues learned about his crimes. Microsoft terminated Derek's employment immediately after his arrest, and his reputation in Seattle's tech community was completely destroyed. Derek would never work in software engineering again. Elena faced additional consequences when news of her arrest spread through Phoenix's Mexican-American community. Elena had built her identity around being a respected family matriarch, but the details of her attempted kidnapping plot made her a pariah among people who'd once admired her. Carmen's life unraveled even more dramatically. She'd quit her job in Phoenix to prepare for her new role as Sophia's mother, and she'd used credit cards to purchase thousands of dollars worth of baby supplies, in anticipation of Derek's custody victory. When the conspiracy collapsed, Carmen was left unemployed in debt and facing criminal charges. The most satisfying moment came 3 weeks after Derek's sentencing, when I received an unexpected visit at my new apartment. Carmen Rodriguez appeared at my door looking nothing like the confident woman who'd planned to steal my daughter. She was thin, obviously stressed, and dressed in clothes that had seen better days. "Jessica," Carmen said when I answered the door, "I need to talk to you about something important." I looked at her calmly and said, "I understand you're facing some difficulties, but I have nothing to discuss with you." Carmen's eyes filled with tears. "Derek told me you were a terrible mother who didn't deserve Sophia. He said you were mentally unstable and career-obsessed. He made me believe that taking Sophia away from you was actually helping her." I felt no sympathy for Carmen's tears. "Derek lied to you just like he lied to me. But you chose to participate in stealing a child from her mother. That's not something you do accidentally." Carmen tried to step closer, but I remained in my doorway. "I'm broke, Jessica. I can't find work because of the criminal conviction. I had to move back in with my parents. I've lost everything." "Good," I replied simply. "You tried to steal my daughter and replace me as her mother. You deserve to lose everything." Carmen stared at me in shock. "You're not going to help me. You're just going to let my life be destroyed." I looked at Carmen with the same calm I'd used with Derek in the hospital. Carmen, you destroyed your own life when you decided to participate in kidnapping a baby. The consequences you're facing are exactly what you earned. I closed the door without another word. Through the window, I watched Carmen sit in her car for 20 minutes, crying and making phone calls to people who apparently weren't answering. I never saw Carmen again, but I heard through Sophia that she'd eventually moved to another state to escape the reputation damage from her criminal conviction. 6 months after the trials ended, Derek sent me a letter from federal prison. The letter was full of self-pity and attempts to minimize his responsibility for the conspiracy. Jessica, Derek wrote, I know you're angry about what happened, but I want you to understand that I never intended for things to go as far as they did. My mother convinced me that we were acting in Sophia's best interests. I miss my daughter and hope that someday you'll allow me to be part of her life again. I read Derek's letter once, then shredded it without responding. Derek had forfeited any right to be part of Sophia's life when he tried to steal her through fraud and deception. Today, Sophia is 18 months old, healthy, brilliant, and completely unaware of the drama that surrounded her birth. She has my eyes and my stubborn determination traits that will serve her well in life. She's walking babbling in both English and Spanish, thanks to our nanny Isabella, who is nothing like Elena, and showing early signs of the analytical thinking that runs in my family. I returned to work at Boeing 6 months after Sophia's birth, but with significant changes to my role and priorities. My colleagues had followed the criminal trials and were incredibly supportive during my transition back to work. Boeing's management created new policies for protecting employees from domestic abuse and family manipulation, partly inspired by my case. The restitution money Derek and Elena were forced to pay allowed me to buy a beautiful house in Bellevue with a yard where Sophia can play safely as she grows up. I've also established a legal defense fund for other women facing custody manipulation, managed by Sophia's expanding family law practice. Sophia and I have become closer friends than ever. She's now dating David Park, the private investigator who helped expose Derek's conspiracy. They bonded over their shared commitment to protecting families from predators, and they've started a consulting firm that helps other women identify and document family manipulation before it reaches crisis levels. Dr. Chen has remained an important part of our lives. She checks on Sophia's development regularly and has become an honorary grandmother figure, the kind of loving, supportive family matriarch I'd always hoped Sophia would have. Dr. Chen's granddaughter and Sophia play together regularly, giving Sophia exposure to healthy family dynamics. My sister Anna moved to Seattle 6 months after Sophia's birth. She'd been looking for a reason to leave Portland anyway, and helping me raise Sophia provided the perfect opportunity. Anna runs a successful marketing consulting business from her home office and serves as Sophia's primary backup caregiver when I travel for work. The most unexpected positive development has been my relationship with Dr. James Chen, a pediatric cardiothoracic surgeon at Seattle Children's Hospital and Dr. Amanda Chen's nephew. James and I met at one of Dr. Chen's family gatherings, and we discovered we had similar experiences with family manipulation and betrayal. James had gone through his own custody battle when his ex-wife tried to alienate their teenage daughter during their divorce. He understood the importance of protecting children from adults who view them as weapons or possessions, rather than people deserving love and stability. Sophia adores James, and he's wonderful with her. He reads to her in English, Spanish, and Mandarin, teaching her about cultural heritage, without the toxic manipulation that Elena had tried to impose. James understands that any relationship we develop must prioritize Sophia's well-being above all else. We're taking things slowly, building trust gradually, and ensuring that Sophia always knows she's loved for who she is, rather than who someone else wants her to become. I've also been considering a significant career change. Several law schools have reached out about my interest in family law advocacy, and the idea of combining my financial analysis skills with legal expertise to help other families appeals to me more each day. Sophia and I have discussed opening an expanded practice together. She'd handle the legal work, while I'd provide financial expert testimony. Help clients understand the economic implications of family manipulation, and teach other women how to protect their assets from predatory family members. The success of our work on my case has already attracted attention from other families facing similar situations. We've consulted on 3 cases where grandparents or extended family members were attempting to gain custody through manufactured evidence of parental unfitness. In each case, our documentation and legal preparation strategies help the targeted parents protect their children and expose the manipulation attempts before they reached crisis levels. But mostly I'm focused on raising Sophia to be strong, independent, and incapable of being manipulated by anyone. She'll learn to trust her instincts, document important information, build supportive relationships with people who respect her autonomy, and fight for what's right when necessary. Sophia will grow up knowing that her mother fought for her before she was born, during her birth, and every day since. She'll understand that family isn't about blood relationships or cultural traditions. It's about love, protection, and putting children's well-being above adult egos and power games. Most importantly, Sophia will know that her worth isn't determined by anyone else's opinion of her background, her heritage, or her family structure. Her worth comes from her own character, her own choices, and her own determination to treat others with respect and kindness. The birth certificate Derek tried to steal was just paper, but the love, protection, and fierce determination I prepared in advance, that was everything. That's what saved Sophia, saved me, and created the foundation for our new life together. Epilogue. The lesson for every woman. If you're reading this story and recognizing patterns in your own life, please know that you're not alone and you're not powerless. The tactics used by people like Elena and Derek aren't unique. They're part of a playbook used by manipulative individuals across all cultures, economic levels, and family structures. Elena's strategy of targeting financially independent women, systematically undermining their confidence, and positioning herself as the authority figure is a common pattern in family manipulation cases. Derek's willingness to betray his wife and steal his own child to please his mother and impress his mistress reflects the weakness of character that makes these conspiracies possible. Here's what I want every woman to remember: trust your instincts. If something feels wrong in your relationship or family dynamics, investigate, instead of dismissing your concerns. I noticed red flags about Elena's controlling behavior and Derek's financial secrecy early in our relationship. But I initially chose to believe their explanations instead of trusting my gut feelings. Document everything. In custody disputes and family manipulation cases, evidence matters more than emotion. The recordings, financial records, surveillance footage, and witness testimony saved Sophia's future more than any heartfelt plea could have. Start documenting concerning behavior as soon as you notice it, even if you hope the situation will improve. Build your professional support network before you need it. Having Sophia, Dr. Chen, David Park, and other professionals in my corner provided both practical help and emotional validation when the crisis hit. Identify trustworthy attorneys, financial advisors, medical professionals, and counselors while you're not in crisis mode. Understand your legal rights and financial protections. Many women lose custody battles or financial security because they don't understand their rights or how to protect them. Consulting with professionals before problems escalate gives you tools and strategies you wouldn't know existed otherwise. Financial independence is a personal safety. Elena's scheme depended on keeping me financially vulnerable and socially isolated. Having my own career, understanding our family assets, and maintaining emergency funds made it harder for Derek to completely control the situation. Never allow anyone to have total control over your financial security. Some people view relationships as competitions to be won. Elena didn't see Sophia as a granddaughter to be loved. She saw her as a prize to be possessed and controlled. Derek didn't see me as a partner to be cherished. He saw me as an obstacle to be removed. Recognizing that mindset early helps you prepare appropriate defenses. Systematic predators rarely stop with one victim. Elena had been destroying women and stealing children for years before targeting me. When you fight back against family manipulation, you're not just protecting yourself and your children, you're potentially saving future victims from similar abuse. Fighting back protects future victims. When you document manipulation, report fraud, or take legal action against systematic abusers, you're creating legal precedents and evidence trails that help other women escape similar situations. Your courage to fight back makes it easier for the next woman to be believed and protected. Healing is possible, but it takes time. Don't expect to get over systematic betrayal quickly. Seek professional counseling. Build supportive relationships with people who respect your autonomy, and be patient with yourself as you rebuild trust and confidence in your own judgment. Your children's safety justifies any necessary action. Don't let guilt, social pressure, or fear of family conflict prevent you from protecting your children from manipulative relatives. Children recover from family dysfunction much better when they're removed from toxic environments early, rather than subjected to years of manipulation. You are stronger than you know. Elena Morales had been perfecting her manipulation techniques for decades, but she was defeated by one woman who refused to be a passive victim. Derek had help from his mother, his mistress, and corrupt legal professionals, but he was still destroyed by documented evidence and strategic planning. If I could fight back and win against such overwhelming odds, so can you. The key is preparation, documentation, and professional support. Don't wait until you're in crisis to start protecting yourself and your children. The most important lesson from my experience is that love isn't enough to protect your family. You need intelligence planning and the courage to use legal systems against people who try to exploit your vulnerability. Elena and Derek thought they could steal Sophia because they assumed I would be too emotional, too overwhelmed, or too trusting to fight back effectively. They were wrong. Your enemies will make similar assumptions about your capabilities. Prove them wrong by being smarter, more prepared, and more determined than they expect. Your story might be different from mine, but your strength is just as real. Trust it, use it, and never let anyone convince you that protecting yourself and your children is somehow wrong or vindictive. Sophia Grace Martinez is sleeping peacefully in her crib as I finish writing this completely safe, completely loved, and completely free from the people who tried to steal her life before she was old enough to defend herself. That's what victory looks like. That's what justice feels like. And that's what every child deserves. A mother who will fight for them, no matter what the cost. Remember, some battles you fight with emotion. Others you fight with preparation, patience, and the law on your side. Choose wisely, fight strategically, and never surrender what belongs to you. The end.